Hi guys, I'm Eric Voss, and a new trailer for Wonder Woman is here. And I feel like they cannot make a bad trailer for this movie. Everything about it looks great. We get more of a sense of the story of this movie, along with some possible villains. There's also a ton of Easter eggs here, and I'm gonna break down all the stuff that you missed. Also, be sure to watch our other breakdown of the first Wonder Woman trailer from Comic-Con last summer. We got into a lot more about Wonder Woman's origin in the comics, and what version of her that we'll see in this movie. Also, fun fact, that video was like one of the first YouTube videos I ever hosted, so go on, take a trip through memory lane, like 4 months ago. Look at that shy little sugar cookie. Anyway, let's get started.
I used to want to save the world.
So, in our opening shots, we see Wonder Woman Diana Prince walking in front of the Louvre Museum in Paris. And we can see those famous glass pyramids. Those were completed in 1989, which confirms that part of this movie will be set in the present day. And I'm thinking that this scene could be part of like a prologue framing device. And the rest of the film is a flashback to Diana's origin story in World War I, kind of like the framing device of the movie Saving Private Ryan. Now, it was implied in Batman vs. Superman that Diana was an antiquities dealer. Remember, she was looking at that sword in the museum scene. So it could be that she actually works in the Louvre in their archive section. Then we see Diana looking at this old photograph, which is the same one that we saw in Batman vs. Superman. Remember, that's how Bruce Wayne outed Diana in the most dramatic way, email attachment. Now, this photo is old enough that it looks like it could be the original. And if you look super close at the shot, the note in the background is written on stationery with the Wayne logo. And I'm sorry, but no matter how much zooming and enhancing I did, I couldn't make out what this note said. Sorry guys, my vision just isn't that good. But regardless, judging from the context, it seems like Bruce Wayne got his hands on the original photo and sent it to Diana as a way to say to her, look, you have the original, no more copies are going out, your secret is safe with me. And this photo ends up being what triggers Diana's memory into the past. Also, it's interesting what Diana says here.
I used to want to save the world.
Now, from a storytelling standpoint, this whole thing is great. The Diana we saw in Batman vs. Superman was still pretty reluctant to jump back into the action. She didn't want to interfere in human drama. She's old and weary. Though, I gotta say, these Justice League heroes pull off grizzled very well. So in order to establish why Diana would really care about joining the Justice League in this upcoming war, there's an emotional need for Diana to revisit the time when she still cared about saving the world from destruction. So this won't be just a DC origin story for the heck of it. Way to justify taking millions more of our dollars, DC. Moving on.
This beautiful place. But the closer you get, the more you see the great darkness within.
So here we get the first of this trailer's gorgeous shots of Themyscira, Paradise Island. That's the home of Diana and the rest of the Amazonians. Now, in the real world, this was shot on the beaches of Camerota in southern Italy. And we talked about this in the first trailer breakdown, but they've added these cool looking rock formations and posts to give this location even more of a mysterious look and explain why this place is so secluded, because it would be really hard for ships to navigate around those rocks. And I just really love this shot of Diana watching Steve Trevor's plane crash into the water. It reminds me of that epic shot from the opener of season 3 of the TV show Lost, when the others watch the plane break up over the island, and just like in that moment, this plane crash is a mix of that excitement of worlds colliding, but also the sense of doom and conflict that that kind of collision usually leads to. And again, Diana's voiceover is really interesting here.
This beautiful place.
As we see this beautiful island, and it seems like she's kind of regretting saving Steve here in the long run, because it took her out of this utopia into the dirty, smoky man's world. And while her words work on that level, they also imply her worldview that the events of this movie will leave her with. This beautiful world is referring to the entire world, planet Earth, and her decision to try to save it through all the horrors of World War I. They showed her how dark humanity can be and why it's sometimes hard to justify fighting for them. Let's move on.
I learned this the hard way, a long, long time ago.
Okay, if you freeze this shot at just the right frame, you'll see that the boat that all these soldiers are jumping out of says Schwaben. That's the German form of Swabia. That's a region in Bavaria on Germany's southern border. So that confirms our theory from the last video that the footage we saw of Steve Trevor posing as a German pilot and stealing a German plane is probably an early action scene with Steve getting into trouble or discovering something at that base, narrowly escaping and getting chased and shot down near Themyscira in some lost corner of the Adriatic Sea or the Mediterranean. And it seems like that chase could be what led these German soldiers to this island, resulting in this epic 300-style beach clash between Germans and Amazonians, with one of them doing the sickest swing move I've ever seen with a bow and arrow. And I should know because I've seen nothing like that ever. But by the looks of things here, it's implying that she takes this German bullet and possibly dies pretty early in the film. May just like graze her or seriously wound her, which would still freak Diana out because she wouldn't have seen this kind of weapon before. And no matter what, this would be kind of a wake-up call to convince Diana that she needs to intervene in the affairs of man to prevent them from continuing to use this kind of lethal force on each other. And since the Germans are sending this many soldiers after Steve, whatever he did or discovered must have been pretty huge, but I'll come back to that. Now, if you look closely here, there's a separate group of 5 figures charging at the Germans separate from the rest of the Amazonian cavalry. And if you look super close to that figure on the far right, it kind of looks like different clothes, like the long German officer coat Steve was wearing in the other parts of the scene. So my guess is that is Steve Trevor, with Diana being one of the other 4. Okay, so putting all this together with the other shots of this beach scene, it looks like this is Steve, Diana, and a few other Amazonians, maybe just shortly after Steve washes up on the beach. Then these Germans arrive and they're like, "Hand over the spy." And Diana's like, no, I've never seen a man before, and I'm not just gonna give him away. And then the Germans are like, "Okay, fine." And then they charge at them, and then the other Amazonians swoop in to save the day. Or maybe the scene is happening later, like after Steve has met all the Amazonians. I don't know, we'll see. All right, moving on.
What is your mission?
To stop the war.
What war?
The war to end all wars. Weapons far deadlier than you can ever imagine.
The war can be ours.
Okay, a lot to talk about here. First, Steve Trevor explains to Diana and Queen Hippolyta how he's trying to prevent
The war to end all wars.
And in the early 20th century, people just referred to World War I as the Great War. No one called it World War I. The sequel wasn't approved yet. Part of the reason for that thinking is that this was the first war to use chemical warfare on such a mass scale. Things like mustard gas that had a devastating effect on soldiers. This is why you can find all those creepy photos of people wearing gas masks during World War I. Like, a lot of soldiers and civilians too had to run drills to quickly throw one on, even though many of them were so crudely made that they didn't really work. It was terrifying. And so I love the way that this movie appears to be working in that history of chemical warfare. Now, this shot of Steve walking, I think that's a reverse angle of the shot that we saw in the last trailer, and the building he's walking towards has these smokestacks. I'm thinking it could be a chemical weapons plant run by the German military. So the thing that Steve discovered may have to do with some new deadly gas weapon that might not just win the war for Germany, but change the course of history. And that deadly gas could be based on this stuff that we see in the globe. Like, in real life, none of the gases that they used in World War I were known to shatter the eyepiece of a gas mask, except maybe Kaiser Wilhelm's farts. Boom! And that brings us to this character, creepy face mask lady, who we said in the last video looked like Mr. Harrow from Boardwalk Empire. And again, a lot of people during those times actually wore masks like this because their faces were so disfigured by things like mustard gas and other terribly violent injuries they sustained during the war. And we see the same woman show up a few times in this trailer, and she throws what looks like some kind of explosive into a room, and a lot of people are saying that this character could be an interesting villain from the Wonder Woman comics, Dr. Poison. Now, in the comics, Dr. Poison is a woman named Princess Maru, and she hides her face with a hood, and she conspires with the Nazis in World War II to try to contaminate the Allies' water supply with Reverso, which is a chemical that makes soldiers do the opposite of whatever orders are given. Now, I'm thinking that this movie could be updating Dr. Poison into this rogue chemical weapons expert who's got her hands on this new deadly weapon, and she could be either in league with the Germans and the rest of the Axis powers, or playing both sides as like kind of a dangerous radical. But there's another villain who shows up in this section, this guy, played by Danny Huston. He showed up in the last trailer, and then we made a few guesses that this could be someone like Kaiser Wilhelm, but if you notice this framed picture on the wall, which you see better in the shot with possible Dr. Poison, that's actually Kaiser Wilhelm. So this guy probably isn't him. But the other person that we said this guy could be is Ares. He's the god of war, Diana's half-brother, and a major recurring enemy to Wonder Woman in the comics. The theory is that Ares has taken a human form in the shape of this German officer, and this trailer definitely makes it seem like that theory is possible. So like, notice how this guy says,
The war can be ours.
it definitely makes him sound a bit more, I don't know, ambitious than your average German general. So like in World War I, the Germans were really just dragged into the conflict because of their alliances, and it was really just a war of contrition for them. Unlike in World War II, when obviously the Germans really did want world domination. And this ambition obviously lines up with Ares, who craves war and power. They're actually more clues later on in this trailer that point in this direction. And before we move on, I just quickly want to pause on this shot of this weird looking explosion on top of a guard tower. Now, the trailer's editing makes it look like this was caused by the thing that possible Dr. Poison tosses, but that was in a large bunker type room of a German base, whereas this looks like a small tower with like some British soldiers below. Like those gas masks are actually the same crude ones worn by British soldiers in World War I. But like, what is this explosion? It's way more advanced than really any kind of firepower that anyone actually had in World War I. So my guess is that this could be an explosion that causes the gas mask shattering toxin to spread. And I could see this scene as like a tragic moment that raises the stakes for Steve and Diana to stop this weapon from getting into the wrong hands any further. Okay, moving on.
Wherever you are in more danger than you think.
I cannot stand by while innocent lives are lost. Be careful, Diana.
Okay, so here we see Diana suiting up with her Amazonian shield and sword, and if you look closely in this shot, you can see the rest of her Wonder Woman garb in the foreground with the red and blue and gold colors and the Wonder Woman sigil. Now in the last trailer, we saw a shot of Hippolyta handing off her crown to Diana, and I feel like this could be a scene where like Diana's going against her mother's wishes to join the world of man, sneaking out with all this gear, but then Hippolyta catching her in the act and then ultimately giving her her last minute blessing. Also, I love the contrast of establishing shots that open and close this section. So like first we get the clear, picturesque Themyscira Paradise Island, followed by the smoky, polluted downtown London. What did I get into? I need one of those like gas masks just to like walk around. And by the way, the reason why there's so much smoke in London here is that during the war, all of England transformed into this industrial state, with nearly every building in London cooking up like weapons, parts, supplies for the war effort. Except that one right there, that plume of smoke clearly came straight from Kaiser Wilhelm's ass. Boom!
Who is this woman?
She's my secretary, sir. She's a very good secretary.
So here we see Steve and Diana walk through this office with a bunch of arguing British officers. So where do we think this is? Now, assuming Steve is a spy working with British intelligence, this might be the offices of MI6, which was actually founded during this time period to spy on the Germans. And this is really a shot in the dark here, but that portrait might be the service's founder, Mansfield Smith Cumming, who before founding MI6 was a captain in the Royal Navy. But I'm not really sure. That guy was super secretive, and there's really only one image I can find of him, and he didn't have a mustache there, so I could be wrong. And I'm loving this mildly upset stiff by the door who's like shooting them a stern British glare. And that kind of suggests that this is a meeting with like high security clearance. And all these guys are like quite put off to see a woman joining the proceedings. Now, of course, a lot of the humor of Wonder Woman is going to be seeing the struggle of a female demigod making the transition from a female-dominated society to a male-dominated one, with Diana clearly being stronger than Steve and all these guys, but having to pretend to be a subordinate to not draw attention. And I like this callback to the first trailer with Steve calling Diana his secretary.
Who is this woman?
She's my secretary.
Remember, the first trailer ended with that clip of Diana asking what a secretary is?
What is a secretary?
I go where he tells me to go and I do what he tells me to do.
Yeah, Diana is clearly not want to be labeled a secretary. But then this cool shot of Diana heroically blocking a bullet with her wrist armor, and then Steve catching the bullet and like hot potatoing it like a little wimp. It's such a great way to show that disparity between their actual toughness. Also, narratively speaking, I'm not really sure why they're being shot at in the first place, but I'm thinking it gives the movie more of this like cloak and dagger, spy games kind of vibe, like James Bond or Jason Bourne, and like these two could have assassins trying to take them out at every turn. Okay, moving on.
It is our sacred duty to defend the world, and it's what I'm going to do.
Okay, so here we see Steve and Diana and this guy, who shows up later in the trailer, crossing a bridge as they pass several wounded soldiers returning home from the front lines, meaning that Steve and Diana are headed towards the front line. And based off Diana's reaction here, it seems like this movie isn't really gonna shy away from the heavy emotional toll that the First World War took on soldiers, many of whom were left with severe PTSD. And then as we see Diana step out of the trenches into the no man's land, that's the place that separates the opposing lines that literally no man can walk out into without getting shot, I'm actually beginning to think that this might be part of Diana's mission to cross enemy lines, since really she's the only one with the actual power to do it. Because why else would they send a valuable intelligence officer and this female demigod right to the spot where frontline soldiers are just getting killed? It's probably not just so they could get that awesome slow-mo shot of Wonder Woman obliterating a bullet on her wrist armor. Now, I'm pretty sure these two have a reason to be here. And judging by Steve's shocked reaction, I really don't think the mission was for Diana to just march right down the middle of the area in broad daylight. Maybe they were trying to find some other other way around. But before we move on, I just gotta point this out. This guy's eyes, like damn, it's like he saw a ghost. Or maybe he just really doesn't want Diana to die. Like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, no! Okay, moving on. Okay, so in this section we get some great action along with some footage that we saw in the first trailer, but there are just a couple things that I want to point out. Okay, so first off, in this German military ball scene, we get a new shot of Steve in what looks like a German officer uniform. So that confirms the theory that he and Diana are undercover, disguised as Germans to get into this ball, maybe so that Diana can attack Danny Houston's character, possibly Ares, who I'll talk more about in a second. Also, we see Steve flying his plane over this massive explosion, and if you look closely at the flames, you can see the smokestacks of that German chemical weapons factory collapsing. So it looks like part of the reason all these Germans are chasing Steve at the beginning of the movie is he bombed the shit out of it. Also, if you notice, his plane definitely gets caught in the flames a little bit, and maybe that's what cripples his engine and causes him to crash land at Themyscira. We also see Diana doing this impressive backflip. Now, in most of the comics, Wonder Woman actually can fly, but remember, this is an origin story where she's still kind of like coming into her powers. So I'm betting that we'll be seeing a lot of cool jumps, and maybe if we're lucky, a little wink at her learning to fly. But if you look at this tall barbed wire fence, it looks like it could be part of a prisoner of war camp. And you can see that same guard tower in the background, which makes me think that that explosion we saw before could be part of like a rescue attempt of a bunch of POWs, which maybe ends up going really poorly and becomes kind of like a false defeat for Diana that she has to overcome. And then this shot of possible Dr. Poison is one of the most menacing shots of the trailer. That's a look of pure anger and hate right there. I think we're really gonna like this villain. Also, you can see a piece of her mask flapping in the wind a little. That's such a cool, subtle detail. Now, check out this shot. Wonder Woman is using her lasso of truth against this guy, who kind of looks like Danny Houston's character from earlier. And if so, this is part of the reason I think that he could be Ares. No like normal human could take this kind of beating. It could be where we end up seeing these two deity siblings duke it out towards the end of the movie, and I suspect that Ares might end up taking another more terrifying form for their final battle, which we wouldn't have seen any part of yet. All right, moving on. Okay, so let's sort through this chaos with like rubble and explosions and focus on a couple things here. So this shot of Danny Houston swinging Diana's sword at her, to me is the clearest evidence I can see that this guy is Ares. The two of them really just do seem like equal matches. Like this is this epic collision between deities. And sorry, I just don't picture this old stout German officer being able to keep up with Wonder Woman blow for blow. And by the way, that shot behind him is German for caution, smoking prohibited, which makes me think that this location is some kind of lab or munitions factory with explosives, maybe where he's producing this new weapon on a mass scale. Also, this shot happens so fast that you might miss it, but when Diana kicks off a piece of rubble as it lifts up, she hovers over it for a second and it almost looks like she's actually flying there. So it could be in like the heat of the final battle, Diana makes this almost accidental discovery and then uses it to finish him off. I don't know, we'll see. And I know everyone's been talking about it, but this electric guitar Wonder Woman theme is so great. It honestly might be my favorite music from any superhero movie like in a while. And that might just be because I can't remember any music from any superhero movie at all. It kind of blends together, honestly. But not this though. I feel like I'm gonna be humming for like a long time. And now let's move on to this last little part of the trailer.
How can a woman possibly fight in this?
Fight? We use our principles, although I am not opposed to engaging in a bit of fisticuffs should the occasion arise.
So the lovable Etta Candy returns in the closing seconds of this trailer as well, which makes me think that she's just gonna pop up into the end of every scene with like a joke or some kind of like quirky gesture. And honestly, I really do hope that this movie finds more time for these like Etta Diana scenes because it's pretty charming to see these two become best friends. And considering the next time we'll see Wonder Woman will be 100 years after this, these two really gotta live it up while they can. Like I wanna see the two of them get drunk in a pub and like wreck it in this bar fight. Or why don't we just give them their own spin-off? Diana, you crushed all the furniture again. Okay, enough. So let me know what you think about this trailer in the comments. And again, be sure to check out our breakdown of the Comic-Con trailer, as well as our breakdown of the Justice League trailer. Now, if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe to New Rockstars for more of these videos. You can also contribute to us on Patreon. Big thanks to all of our current patrons. We love you guys. Hit me up on Twitter at EAVoss with any thoughts that you might have on the Wonder Woman trailer. You can also follow New Rockstars at New Rockstars and bother them about when our videos are coming out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.